Everybody's in.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. Can you, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and read this, and forgive me, it's not like y'all can't read, but I couldn't say this any better. So the objective of Job Connection is to support y'all job seekers throughout the job search process and help you grow, and also with your relationship with God during your journey. Our goal is to help job seekers and you all to realize the true full potential you have and engage in the work that you were created to do and love. We like to offer hope, and of course, H is for help. We're happy to help you at any point. All of our volunteers are happy to help any of you and provide opportunity for you through the help, but also I'll get into it, but we have lots of jobs listed through our website online, through Rockwell and nationally. We offer prayer and support for you and encouragement. So we like to begin with the scripture with Hebrews 4:16. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Okay. Greg, would you be so kind to offer our morning opening prayer?
Yes, thank you. If I could just offer an observation also beforehand.
Please.
It struck me as we were going through the interview or the introductions about Bobby's story, how he had, and it's like so many of our stories, that he had been with the company for 25 years, loved what he was doing, and then all of a sudden it was gone. But I think it really illustrates how God often uses the tough times in our lives to prepare us for service and for joy to come. If it wasn't for that event, in the mid-90s, we wouldn't be here today. And so, because of that event, because of the trial that was occurring then, it prepared for service, and it prepared us to come today and come together and serve God by serving others. There are a number of other examples like that throughout the Bible. One of those is the story of Joseph. Joseph's in prison. He's called before Pharaoh for what can be seen as testing, and perhaps as an interview. But he's called out of prison. It's recorded that he was given time to clean up, shave, and change his clothes before meeting Pharaoh. And being a man of strong faith, I have to believe that Joseph was also praying fervently during that time and preparing himself both spiritually and emotionally as well as physically. And we know that the preparation for the interview process is as important as the interview itself. We know how that story ends. We know ours will end as well if we have faith, and God will make great things happen from bad times. So let us join in prayer. Lord, please grant us wisdom today, and grant us the insight to know, to follow you and to go where you lead us, because you have plans already made for us. You know what the future will be. Help us, Father, to walk in the way that you would guide us, and to show us, help us to accomplish what it is that you have planned for us. These things we ask in the name of your Son and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Greg. All right, so this workshop, especially those that haven't been here before, we have 7 different workshops. We strongly encourage you to come to each one if it's possible, even if it is Zoom, because there's so much fantastic information that, if you miss one, you're missing a piece of it to help you in this whole process. So today we're doing the Preparing for Successful Interviews. It's our 4th rotation, 4th in the series, I should say. And then we repeat after all these. So we start with getting started marketing yourself. And that is starting to build a resume. And number 2 is composing accomplishments-based resumes. And again, this is all vital because especially these first 2, because everything we talk about even after that comes back to the resume and having accomplishments through stories that you write, and we can help you with that. Next is LinkedIn with your digital resume. Then today, successful interviewing. Next, we have behavioral interviews, and those are the kind of questions, it's not a yes or no answer. And they give you scenarios and you need to have an answer for that and be prepared. So we help you with some of the questions, and if you need help with those answers, we're there for you as well. The second part of LinkedIn, your research tool, and I believe that's just more of a in-depth on how to prepare your LinkedIn profile. And then lastly, we do a session on networking. And networking is a key because 70 to 80% of jobs out there are gotten through networking and through somebody that knows somebody, versus just the standard way of applying and waiting and hoping. So our mission today is to give you hope. One of the things I like to mention, if you look up in the corner, is the QR code. So you all can take a snap picture of that with your phone, or just go right to our website, and it has a lot of great information. So, okay, is that working? Okay. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different things. It's to help you prepare for your interview. And that is a key word you're going to hear me keep saying, and Henry here and assisting me is preparing. Because when you feel like you're really fully prepared, it'll help you with any nervousness that we all have, which is common, but we'll talk about building rapport with the person you meet in the interview. You know, what questions you may be asked so that you can have a good answer for that. Using your stories, like I mentioned about when you create a resume, having accomplishment-based stories, because that will help you when they ask you something and you're going to remember a story of accomplishment and fit that need with. We're going to also help you with determining the questions that you should ask. You should always have questions, and help you with ideas on successfully negotiating the salary, and then looking for green lights, which is go ahead. It's hard to explain what that is, but it's when you're in the interview and they start showing you around or meeting other people, those are green lights. So
Show you the empty office.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Showing you around the office, right? Thank you. Okay. All right. So there's basically the 4 different types of interviews. Initially, usually you have a phone interview, which is basically just screening. They like to get it down to about 2 or 3 candidates. So you may end up having first a phone interview with the recruiter or with HR. And it can also be through Zoom. But again, generally it's a screener, and it's a way of eliminating the candidates. So again, it's something I'm hoping today that you are going to be prepared for before that phone ever rings. Okay. Then you have your in-person interview, which is usually with the decision maker or a manager. Again, another basically elimination stage to narrow it down. You may have in the process a panel interviewing, which is generally 3 or more managers or coworkers. That would be somebody you might be working with. And then the last could be a networking interview. So the networking interview, which we talk about in the networking session, is you're learning how to connect with people, how to network, and basically you're interviewing a person that you may know or somebody's referred you to, and you're asking for advice and referrals. Okay. Okay, so this is one I always like to expand on. It does begin, the interview begins before you even arrive. I have said this for years. It doesn't matter with internet and you know, Google Chrome and all the map things. You really should still drive. If you have an interview and it's that important to you, you should go on every interview, by the way, if you can. It just gives you practice. I had a job that I never thought I would want, and I went on the interview and ended up getting it and loving it. Who would have known? So go on all the interviews you possibly can that you can get. But if you drive that location, you're going to have an idea how long does it take to get there, where you're supposed to park, What are the, part of the reason where to park, because I've had it where you're given the address of the corporate headquarters, but the interview actually might be in a different spot. So you might want to arrive at least 15 minutes before, or of course, for your interview. Make the receptionist your ally. And this is key, because if you're unhappy or rude, or nobody's really rude in Dallas, they're just wonderful here, but if you don't give her the respect, or him, with eye contact and professionalism, that can do it for you too before you even meet them. Because they're seeing you for the first time and you're still making an impression with them.
And I think it's important too, if you don't mind, is that
Of course.
they are so important, the receptionist with whoever she's interviewing. I mean, whoever she's working with, her boss trusts her, and he's gonna say, how did he act? How did she act?
Mhm.
Were they pushy? And a lot of that stuff really, you're trying to go in there with no negativity about you whatsoever. Getting there early, even though it's a good thing, gives you a little negative vibe with the interview. Just do everything to where you come in there with a clean slate, and then you have the opportunity to sell yourself.
Mhm. Thank
May
you.
I share a story?
Yes.
This has happened to me once, but again, it's just, I'm a very helpful person.
Sure.
But you're correct about the receptionist.
Yeah.
So when I walked into, when I decided to go into the furniture business, I walked into this company in my interview. I was there 15 minutes early. And I introduced myself, started talking to the young lady. But I realized she had a bigger role than just receptionist. She did a multiple tasks. And she asked me, hey, are you familiar with oh my God, he was putting together a PowerPoint to email to all the wholesale. And she asked me, was I familiar with knowing how to do that? And I said, yeah, I am. And so basically what I helped put together was a Black Friday sale. And I was able to explain. She says, well, I'll tell you what, sit down and that. And I said, okay, and I started doing it, and I put it all together and started stacking pictures here and there. I said, okay, this paragraph, you need to explain what you're gonna run on sale, what the cost is, and what the wholesaler is gonna pay.
Sure.
So after I did that, I did that literally for 20 minutes. I had a job, I just didn't. I mean, it just because of just saying, yeah, I knew how to operate, how to do blast emails.
I like to think that companies don't really want to hire people because they're a pain in the butt, but they do have problems and they need people to help them solve problems. So when you can help someone solve a problem, you can become their best friend.
Yes.
The facts are that they will teach you the things that you need to know about their particular organization, but they can't teach you that talent that you just described there about you.
Yeah.
So hiring that makes you the connector. That makes that point the connector to the job, how you can serve them, and that makes you the person.
And I knew very little about constant contact, but I just knew enough how to formulate it, how to structure different various things, composing everything in a small amount of words and time to make it explode.
I think it was also very important that you recognize that she had more than just receptionist.
Mhm.
Yes.
The fact is, you never know what,
Mhm.
I mean, if you just, sometimes I've seen people that seem to delegate, importance to certain people based on their job, not really understanding how really important they can be. And so don't ever discount anyone at a company. just
I
because of
need
the job.
the parking guard, if it's a.
And
I think it's a great story, and what you're gonna find out here is we're gonna go through some more information, here, some more slides, and we're gonna probably come back to that story as a complement.
Good story.
Mhm.
That's great, we'll come back to that.
And you never know if they're a relative of the owner of the company. I mean, that's why it's just
Daughter.
always to be professional. So make sure you ask for business cards of who you will meet, because you'll have the spelling of their names. And if you write a thank you note and put it in the mail, then you have that address and title and correct spelling. But anyway, so that's real important.
That one about pronounce their name, I had an experience. I was delivering something to somebody and I called The woman answered and I said, is Macchio there? She said, no, I don't have a Macchio here. I have a Maceo. And I said, oh, yes, that's who I wanted. Yes. So it does help. No.
You know, and if I go in an interview and they do have an unusual name, even if the receptionist pronounced it, I will confirm that.
Yes.
Because again, they get to talk about themselves and it might open up some rapport too.
And also when you use that, what you've learned, pronunciation of the person you're gonna interview's name, you get a lot of points. If it's a difficult name and you're pronouncing it correctly, another point for you.
Mhm, mhm. Do not eat or drink while you're waiting. I know this seems obvious, but you know, what I say is if you're in the lobby, you can be on your phone if you're like texting or looking through. Do not take a call because you don't know what you might say that they'll overhear. Do not make a call, but do not eat or drink. Now I've had interviews where they're like, you know, would you like some water? Because it just seems so casual. And I'll say, well, are you having some? If they say yes, then I say yes. If they don't, then no, I'm good. Most of the time I say that I'm fine. Make sure you silence your phone. Because if that phone goes off or a ding, the interview's over.
Yeah.
It's disrespectful of their time. And of course, don't take calls. Also, the young people, I shouldn't categorize, but I've just seen this and I've heard stories from my son who interviews people. And God love them, they'll come in with one of these things about twice this size, a big Slurpee or whatever in an interview. Do not do that. Do not do that.
Don't use a
And
straw.
they'll sit there and drink while they're in the interview. So if you have children that are going on an interview, please tell them not to take a big cup of water.
If you walk into somebody's office during an interview and you have a cup like Don was talking about, or any cup, or whatever it is, and you see, even if it's a bottle with a cap on it, when you sit down, what are you gonna do with that bottle? Well, you have to put it somewhere. Because you may need to take some notes while you're talking, and so are you can sit it on the floor? If it's an open cup, it could spill because carpet is kind of like that. Or you could sit it on their desk. No, you don't want to sit on their desk because that's their personal property. So the question is, what are you gonna do with it? And the answer is that you probably won't dehydrate in a 60-minute interview. So it's okay. So all things like that, eating and drinking and things, it sounds so ordinary, but the facts are that they could be major eliminators, because as Don has pointed out, all it takes is something to come up to be a negative. The interview process is not about inclusion, it's about exclusion, but excluding you. So they're looking for things that would exclude you. And when that happens, then you're excluded. And when you're excluded, you leave and you're not part of the process anymore. So these things are all just eliminators, or potential eliminators. And so you want to eliminate the eliminators in every way that you can.
Yeah, and I will say that you don't want to eat or drink in your interview, but you can eat, drink in here because we still have good.
By the way, our discussion are quite formal, so, you know, in a discussion, so if anyone needs to break to the restroom or coffee or anything, just feel free to do that. Don't worry, don't hold back.
Right, and again, this is casual, so if any of you have any questions during this presentation, please raise your hand or just shout it out. So carry a portfolio, forgive mine, it is beat up, I gotta get a new one, with you to the interview. Now, I get kind of picky about this, because it needs to be clean, you know, you need to be prepared. There should be a pen at your disposal, make sure that it works. Make sure
Right, that's good.
Not one pen. Have a extra pen.
Yeah, extra bit.
When you get there, you try to write an important point, and the
Right.
pen that you have doesn't work, you've missed the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's not good to ask me how far your pen.
Right. Right, and of course, in an interview, you need to maintain that eye contact, right? And so be prepared again, make sure you have a pen, make sure that it works. Make sure you have several copies of your resume. I had an interview once, it was going well, and the girl said, hold on a minute, and she brought in like 3 or 4 people. And each time I had a copy. they started to look over her shoulder at mine, and they didn't have to do that, because I had 4 or 5 copies with me. Make sure you have a digital copy on your phone as well. Let's see, make sure, since we're talking about portfolio, and I may be jumping ahead, but I don't want to forget this important point, that you have your questions, which we'll talk about later, spelled out, number them, so that if they look down and see, first they may see the smiley face to remind you to smile that you have on there. I know it seems silly, but it's important. But then you have at least 3 questions. So again, it shows at a glance, it shows you're prepared. Make sure you dress appropriately. If you have, any of you have any questions about how to dress, what to wear, what not to wear, please let us know. Not a lot of jewelry for women. Keys in your pocket, this is for men. That's fine, just don't have them be jiggling and noisy and loud. Like you have a whole bunch of them, so you're walking through your, sounding like a gentleman, I don't know, that you can that you're rattling. Of course, no hats, no glasses on top of your head. Just minimize any distractions. And I always say too, don't wear strong cologne perfume. Okay. Are there any questions regarding this?
Comment over here.
Yes.
It's reading glasses. I usually leave it on my nose, but I don't use it but to read. What do you think about that? Should I take it off?
I think you should, when you introduce yourself and say, and I mean, I don't know. If you need him to ask your questions, I would think that would be the time you put them on.
To me, it's distracting.
Yeah.
I'd rather you have if you have a jacket, put them in your pocket or somewhere.
Okay.
Cause it,
Thank you.
Yeah. And I would have them pushed up if you put them on to read your questions. Okay.
I can do without them. If I need, I can read without,
Right.
especially if it's my writing.
Yeah. Mhm.
Is there a
Yeah.
comment also online? Did I hear?
Yes, somebody have a question?
Well, I was going to say that the last interview I went on, I was given very little time to actually ask my questions. And so even though I had them all in a spreadsheet, I neglected to prioritize them so that I could just go right to the first one that was most important, since I was just given, a small amount of time to ask questions, which I took that to be a red light that
Yeah.
I wasn't going to get the job, but
Right.
Or you weren't talking to the decision maker. The
Oh,
decision maker would have asked the question if you had
Well,
any questions out of hand.
Well, I knew it was a red light, like when the interview began and they never took the time to introduce themselves or tell me about how long, they had been with the company, what their role is and so what.
Yeah.
So I don't take a lot of
That's why-
stock in that, but I chalk that up as a learning experience.
Right.
that's why getting the business cards ahead of time will give you some of that information that might help. And
Wow, this
if
was
you're-
a Zoom. So
Oh, well,
yeah, I
that's-
knew.
that's a
I was-
different one.
Right, I was provided the names of the 2 individuals that were supposed to interview me, but on the day of, one of them appeared and somebody else appeared. And all I saw was the name on the Zoom, and she didn't, she apparently was the hiring manager and didn't bother to introduce herself, tell me her role or anything like that, which it really, that immediately sent me down kind of a downward spiral because it was like, well, who am I even talking to? So I've decided in the future, if that happens, I'm going to take control and say, hey, before we begin, may I know, or is that wrong too?
No, say a little bit about you.
Right.
That's fine. People like to talk about themselves, but
Because it sounds like she was just interviewing for a quota.
Yeah. That sounds.
I don't know what it was, but it was.
But I will
bad.
say, a lot of times people don't want to do the interviewing, so they stick people that at the company that don't have experience with it. So trust me, don't be nervous, because chances are they're just as nervous, but they may not be good at all at interviewing. So, and if they feel pressure with whatever else they've gotten going on with their job, it doesn't surprise me sometimes to hear this stuff.
Yeah.
So, but one last point, we'll move on, is that I'm sorry.
Just gonna ask, if you're going to an interview and you're dressed, like Sunday best,
you wouldn't wear tennis shoes versus say, black shoe, for men, black shoes. In other words,
Right.
I don't know if it's Oxford or whatever you call it, but strict, what you wear in church,
Mhm.
you'd have like closed, black shoes versus tennis shoes, which doesn't sound like that'd be too professional.
Well,
what
and
if
that's
you-
why it helps a lot of times to go scout it out
Sure.
before,
Yeah.
to see how,
So I was gonna
and
say,
it also depends on the environment. If you're going for a manufacturing place, it's hard-toe closed
Yeah.
shoes.
Shoes.
If you're going to a relaxed environment,
business
I mean,
casual. is what
you
call
can see the black tennis shoes that, I've seen a
You-
lot of
you
that
can-
lately.
The dress, my perception or my thought about a dress in an interview is that you should dress slightly above the person that you're interviewing with, whatever they are wearing. Because they're wearing their normal uniform, which could be a suit, or it could be slacks and a golf shirt, or it could be jeans and work boots. And so what's important is not that you dress up. What's important is that you dress like the people that you're interviewing with, so that you can be seen as someone that can fit into that environment. So like Vicky said, if you go the day before and
Drive it.
just look and see who's walking in, what do they wear, what do they do? And if you can talk to somebody that works there about what do they do, now you can learn a lot about what the actual dress is, because you want to dress like the person that you're interviewing with. I had a client in San Antonio one time that was a very high-end computer firm. I went into his office and asked where he was, and I saw a guy coming out of an office in a pair of basketball shorts, tennis shoes without socks, and a t-shirt, one of the white beater type t-shirt type things coming out there, and that was the president of the company. That's what that was. What I don't recommend dressing like that, but you could dress a little bit better than that. But
That's
but that's the target that you want to get.
But don't drive over there on casual Friday
Yeah.
when everybody's
Yeah.
wearing
Yeah.
jeans and t-shirts.
Like we said, sit in the parking lot and watch.
Yes.
You drive it.
So they.
And if it's a Zoom call,
Interview, but you mentioned to write a thank you letter after that. You mean letter that you send with a stamp in the mail?
A short, very short note. Ms. Vicky.
And I-
Or email.
We'll talk about.
I'll address that
Yeah, go
at the end of the.
Okay.
I think it's really, really important, and I did a whole presentation on it, but we'll focus on that when we finish the interview.
Yeah, did you have nothing?
I was just gonna say, and if it was done, if it's a Zoom call, try to prepare and make sure you have proper connectivity and you don't have any issues that is gonna cause you to be delayed. And
Good.
and
Yes.
when I had an interview with KPMG, luckily my wife works there too. And so we were able to actually, have her send me a meeting notice so that I could make sure that I could connect through Teams instead of Zoom. And that way I
Yes.
wouldn't be late. And it's awkward to be early on a video and watch yourself, but that's better than not being able to connect at all.
Well, and on Zoom, it's also important what's in your background. So it's important to choose where you're gonna sit and your lighting, and make sure that your the camera is up high enough so you're not looking down. We had a whole lot on Zoom back in COVID times.
Yeah, make sure the lighting's right, because if you have a window behind you, you're gonna be dark.
Yes.
And you need to be seen. Also, if you have dogs, make sure that they're in a room, they're not gonna bark and disrupt your interview, or children. So that all, again, is something to think through, to be prepared.
I
The
actually
other
grabbed
thing
my,
I also, what
I was
please?
gonna- I was gonna say, I actually grabbed my wife's makeup mirror and used that to give me more
Yeah.
lighting and shined it.
Yeah.
in. She came home,
Right.
she's like, "What are you doing?" I says, "Just for my interview."
Doing it.
Sure.
Right. One other last point, we'll go to the next one, is I want to make sure when I say too, to make sure your pen works. There are so many times, no matter if you've been in this business for 20 years, that a company will have an acronym. Or they'll have an abbreviation for something that you've never heard before. And that's where you take your eyes down for a second and you write down that word. It not only compliments the interviewer that you're listening, but it gives you a question if your questions are answered that you may have written out. Just one backup, well, what did you mean by this? Or what did you mean by this? And in healthcare, they can speak sentences and paragraphs in acronyms. So, and so you really need to be, like I said, have that pen in your hand when you're interviewing and not taking your eyes off of them a lot, but taking them off for a second to jot that word down that you're not sure what they meant. So, but, okay. All right, let's see. I'm going to bring all this up. Okay, do your research. And I know this is standard, but I'm still going to say it. You need to Google and get on and find out what you can about the company. Go to their website, Google them, see what people are saying about them, find out as much as you can. I always knew when the company started. I would always bring up, well, I realize that you've been in business because I saw you started in 1972 or whatever.
Where the corporate office is.
Right, and where the corporate office is. Do they have branches? Kind of have an idea of their locations and everything. Check out LinkedIn and maybe some of the person you're interviewing with. And if you do get names of who you'll be interviewing with, and find out, you can do a little research on them before the interview. Know if you can find out where they are financially. Are they in good, stable position? And what's their stock value? Because, as Bobby and I have attested, it happened to my husband once. He was interviewed, got a job, and in 2 weeks they laid him off. And the only reason was because they were trying to build their employee base to look good for selling it. And so you gotta be smart. You gotta do your research and look that up.
Something to consider if they have multiple locations, it might be a relocation thing. If they're a national company with multiple sites all over the country. Or the world.
So, and of course, they're going to ask, why do you want to work here? And you need to start it off with, in my research, I found, and have an answer for that. And we can help you with that as well. So again, do your homework on this. Okay. I don't know if any of you have ever heard about the STAR approach. I'm going to let Dennis talk about that for just a minute, but you need to, it's very common that they'll ask you about a situation and use this format in an interview process. It's to rehearse your accomplishment stories. And again, I've talked about that before, and I'm going to mention a little bit more. When we go through the resume workshops, we have you write down your accomplishments, whether it be with a company, whether it was 30 years ago, whether it was even a volunteer position, something that you did that solved a problem. And so the S is describe the event, describe the situation. The second one is task. What was it? Why was there a task to be done? A is for it says what did you do to make it happen? What was the action that you did? And then R is for results. What were the results? If you can quantify it by percent, like if you were in sales and you increased the territory 30%, that's a quantifiable result. Not all things are quantifiable, and that's fine. And we can talk about that some more too if you have certain questions regarding that. But it just adds magnitude. And so this is really important. When you write your accomplishments, you can use this STAR approach and it'll help you. And these are your stories so that when you're sitting waiting on your interview in the car because you're early, you can go through them one by one on notes that you've written out on a card so that you can, if they ask about something, because they're hiring you to solve a problem. So if they ask you something, you can say, you know what, yes, I remember a time when, and you can bring this story out, this accomplishment story, to show how you can help them and solve their problem. Dennis, do you want to talk about that too a little bit?
Sure, if this is your first time here, or if this is your fourth or fifth time here, or whatever, you're gonna hear about accomplishment-based stories every time. This is really the key, this is the key that if you get nothing else out of this today, it's about accomplishment-based stories, and you wanna have, as Bobby would say, N+1. So you wanna have as many as you can. And we also always let everybody know is, even in interviews, wherever, you're always trying to bridge back to the stories. Because you go to the interviews and then basically you go in there and you're a blank slate. And they're trying to paint a picture of you, and they'll find a lot out about you on the stories. We used the STAR program at Caterpillar when I was there. And usually for interviews, I would always write down STAR. And as we would ask people questions, we would always try to say, hey, can you tell me a time when?
And you had a panel interview.
Yes,
This is
we
panel.
typically have panel interviews. And so we would go through that, just what Donna talked about, the S, what was the situation? The T, the task, the action and the result. And that's what, Roy, going back to your story, I was thinking about that when you were telling that, because you can kind of go right back up to, you can say, hey, what was that event? And then the task, you know, what was it? The action, what did you do? You told us how you sat there and you did that, and then what was the results? And so you'll go through those accomplishment-based stories, and it's not so much about the particular story, but it's about what do they hear about you when that story is going on, okay? About basically, maybe you could manage, you could take the lead, you were innovative, you knew how to do some of those things. That's what was so important about the stories. They learned a lot about you. But this is really key. It's the STAR, and we go through that, every one of these, every time we get together and go through a presentation, we come back to this, because we really want you in the interviews to bridge back to those stories.
Something above and beyond the call of duty, so to speak, something out of the ordinary that you accomplished that would be an accomplishment story that you didn't have to do, but you did it.
Yep.
Mhm.
So,
All right, any questions on this? All right. Okay, I'm gonna let Henry talk about this for a little bit.
These are interested, I think, well, we'll make sure everybody's got a list, but let me get to that and see what we said, what are we talking about? My
Well,
stories, but
right,
well, can I go ahead and just?
yeah.
So we do the stories,
Oh,
and then you give your story. And then after you do your story, we're gonna go back up to this matrix here. We're gonna say, what was it that we found out about you during that? And so in your story, if you go back and you say, okay, you give your story, you write it down. Because we always tell people to write your stories down, because otherwise you won't remember. And we go back and we'll go, what did we learn about you? And so you look at this, you can say you were leading, you were adapting, and maybe what are some other things that people learned about you here?
Communicating.
And what we would say is, those then would be your strengths. You've demonstrated your strengths. And that's what's key about the stories, because during an interview, if somebody says to you, hey, can you tell me a time when? It allows you to bridge back to that story and say, I know what you're talking about, a time when, and you can bridge to your story. And then we also tell people about the stories to write them down. And then we keep your stories to about 2 minutes, because during an interview, your interview typically 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and you don't want to go on and on and on. And if you can do the stories and come prepared to the interview with a few of the stories in mind, bridge to them. But that's what this interest sheet is
Yeah,
about.
and these skills, like yours, immediately communicating and designing and the planning of how to do the layout, there's so much in that. And the thing is, those were skills that skills is transferable across any industry. So it's not that you've learned that skill when you were at your previous financial job or whatever, and now you're at manufacturing, but skills are transferable. And so that's what these companies are looking for on their resumes. You read it, you can kind of pick out the kind of skills that they really need.
I like to think about this as being, in sales, you want to talk about the products and services that you provide, right? But you don't want to try to sell everything to them because they have a special need. Discovering what that need is and supplying that product or service for them is the connector. And so what our stories are really your attributes or your skills or the things that you bring to the table. That you're in this case, you're the product, you're the service. So you're describing your successes and accomplishments in terms that they can understand. So as I'm talking with somebody and I see a need, I can bring that story to the table and sell that concept because they're looking for people that can organize. Well, I've organized things and I've helped serve an organization. And so that ties it. So these things become the connectors to our story. So when I write a story of accomplishment, and by the way, it's real important to write those stories because you may have a lot of them, but you won't recall them while you're sitting in the line of fire and talking. You're going to lose some of those. So by writing these stories and building a collection, a database of your stories to tell, that's going to be really important to do so that you can recall it easily and quickly during the conversation. So as I'm now ready to tell these stories, but which stories do I tell? Well, these things are going to come up during the course of a conversation. So this is really important. You want to listen for opportunities to talk about empathizing or developing or analyzing or team leading or managing or whatever, problem solving or whatever it happens to be, because I can tell a story about that attribute. So when that attribute comes up in the interview, I can immediately bridge over to the story that describes that attribute. And that's why this is real important. These are the connectors that connect your stories to that connect your stories that allow you to be able to tell that story at that particular time.
And you can say your story and kind of finish it even with, so basically, I observed the situation. I led this team through this project and we had a successful outcome. You can kind of wrap it up a little bit from that story. Otherwise, basically subconsciously the interviewers recognizing that from your what you did with your accomplishments. So, okay. Any questions on these?
Just one note on that. I like to also go back to what Bobby says a lot of times. It's a process of elimination. And so you don't want to be eliminated. And so the more you're prepared, the less chance you have of being eliminated.
If you've ever been at a sales meeting and you were sitting there and talking to somebody about what their needs are, and you finally figured out what that need was, and you could bring that need, and they said, hey, I need that. That's what you're doing in an interview. It's exactly what you're doing in an interview. That's how you prepare for an interview, by writing those stories, understanding when you're going to communicate them so that you can bring them to the table at a time where they'll see you as that problem solver, that organizer, that developer, that team lead, whatever it is that they're looking for. I'm telling them a story about how I can do that. I'm listening for that opportunity so I can bridge into the story with, hey, I know what you're talking about. One time before, when I was here, I ran a real similar type situation like this, and I tell a story about problems or persuading or building or communicating or whatever the story says about you. Yes, sir.
I mentioned in the first meeting, but again, in our age, we have a lot of experience. And when you get into the interview, you can talk and talk and talk so much about your experience, and they hear probably many others talking the same. So instead of start to show my muscles and I did this and I did that, I'll ask the person that interview me, maybe can you tell me what your challenges that you are facing here? And I'll be able to tell you how can I, if I can, and how I can help you with solving them. And that brings you out from the crowd of others that interview. And if you can help, it will help you also to get a job.
That's an excellent point, because, and this is really, this discussion we're having is key to the interview process, because many times we think, well, I've got all these accomplishments and stories, and so I need to tell them all of these stories, so that maybe one of these stories will hit something that they're wanting to do, and that's wrong. That's the wrong way to, you wouldn't run into their office and have a menu of all the products that you're selling and say, here, pick something. You wouldn't do that, so why would you do that in an interview? So what you want to do, I think, someone told me one time that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we talk. You can't learn anything when you're talking. So stop talking and listen to what they say. And what they're saying there is very wise, is ask questions that cause them to talk. Ask questions that cause them to talk about and so that you can learn from them what their needs are. So I can find that story and bring that story to the table and make it connecting.
You ask an open-ended question where the response won't be a yes or no. They have to converse in their answer.
Also, in the mental round, try to be your being, like you're not interviewed.
Mhm.
You're there working with him
Mhm.
to solve his problems.
Mhm.
The job, yes, you are there for a job, but if you'll be in this mode of being, I think the person will cooperate with you better and will see the potential, how you can help him instead of you are seeking for a job.
I heard somebody say one time that in sales, everyone loves to buy things, but no one likes to be sold to.
Yeah.
No one likes to be sold to. And I think that certainly applies to me. And so in an interview, don't go sell you, don't go in there to just flood them with everything you can do. Have a conversation with them during this interview and learn from them what their needs are by asking questions that cause them to talk about those, so that you can bring the proper story to the table. Because the bottom line, the answer to the question is bringing the right stories to the table at the right time. And that's the answer.
It's important to build up a rapport. You know, if you look behind him and he's got a picture of him with little league, or he's up there with a fish or anything else, you know, there's something there that talks about just to get that common ground flowing. And it takes away that sting of being so.
I'm just gonna have one other quick thing. I actually had an interview once where really early on in the interview, they said, so why do you think you're fit for the job? And I thought, I don't even know that much about it back in my head. And I said, well, I am happy to answer that for you, but would you mind taking a few minutes and talking to me more about the position and what it is that you're looking for and what it's about? And they just talked and talked and talked. And so what I want to point out real quick is that your job description, if you applied or saw it written, is from HR typically. It may not actually be what it is they're looking for. So the hot buttons that you're looking by telling an accomplishment story to be called back for another interview may be completely different than what you've read or thought the job was about. So it's a great question, number one, to get them talking. And number two, to find out what it is they're really looking for. What are their hot buttons of a problem that you need, that you can solve for them? So, you know, if you feel like they asked you that question and you don't really know that much, put it back on them. Fine. Could you please just go ahead and, I'm happy to answer that, but please go ahead. Would you mind expanding on the role and what it is that you're looking for? So that I have a better understanding of how to answer that.
An open-ended question is much more valuable than a yes or no question.
Okay, we're gonna move on. We're on a little bit behind. Again, prepare yourself. Do you fit the position? Again, apply to everything. Go to the interviews, even if you don't think you do. You never know how you may fit them. You never know how that you may end up really excited about it. Do you have the personality for it? Are you excited about it? Because that's got to show interest in the interview. If you're excited about it, you got to be excited. Do you have the relevant skills, and can you add value to the company? Let me put this up. I like to put them all up. Okay, so you're going to hear this question, of course. Tell me about yourself. What makes you an excellent fit for this position? That's where you need to come up with your marketable definition, kind of like your elevator pitch. I'm the kind of person who, you can start it with that, describing your strengths and abilities. That can relate to your objective on a resume as well. You need to be confident, you need to be short and to the point, and expound on your accomplishments. So we can help you with this. And as we also kind of go through the resume, you'll hear us talk more a little bit about it. But you certainly need to have your answer prepared and ready for that. Again, we can help you write it or help you because they are going to ask you to tell you about yourself. And a lot of times it's to see how you react more than what it is you say.
And I think the thing that's really important is, you know, that this is a business discussion, not a personal, social discussion. Tell me about yourself when you're out at social parties. You're gonna tell, well, I live over here and I'm wife, so many kids, whatever. But this is all about business, the kind of person you are, not anything about your personal life.
Thank you.
And this is the question you know that's gonna come up. You're gonna have it come up in casual situations, professional situations. This is the one question you prepare your answer for ahead of time and you practice it and you go over it. And that's one of the reasons why each time you come, we want you to introduce yourself and we want you to practice your marketable definition. I'm the kind of person who enjoys managing projects. I'm very creative. I'm good with communicating. So practice what you're going to say, identifying your strengths and why you would want to be there. That's important to come out. So as Al said, it's not about person.
As a recruiter, I'd use this question in interviews to cause them to start talking, because I want them to start talking during the interview. So well, tell me a little about yourself and just leave it open. A lot of times to see what direction they go, whether they're going to talk about their dog or their children or their car breaking down, or they're going to talk about the job that they had. This is an opportunity, asking this question, this is an opportunity for you to sell yourself. And so do that, sell yourself with this question. And we found the best way to do it, the template we use is begin the answer with, I'm the type of person who, and then finish that with your strengths and your abilities. That I'm the type of person who, just like Vicki was saying, I'm the type of person who loves to get involved with things and learn new things and has been going forward in helping people through difficult times. So that's a real simple thing. Is that going to get you an interview? Is that going to get you a job? No, but it's going to set in their mind who you are, or you've thought about it. You know what you want to do, and you know who you are, what you can bring to the table. That's really all it's going to do.
Again, being prepared, but I also like to say, practice it, but don't let it come out robotic.
Yes.
Okay.
And the more confident stories you write down, you'll have a better answer that you can put for this answer.
Okay, so we want to avoid these terms and we'll explain a little bit. Well, I'm a people person, you know, I'm detail oriented, hardworking. Those are what we call empty descriptions of you, unless you have a story with it. So if you say, well, I'm a team player. Once when I was on chosen to be on this team to solve whatever, the task was to do this. And I'm the one that spearheaded and came up with an idea that ended up, you know, being one of the turned into whatever the company or, you know, so you have to back it up with a story. Otherwise, these are just empty and you need to avoid them. Okay. Oops, whoops, I didn't mean that. Go back. Okay, there we go. And this is common too. They have the right to ask, why did you leave your last job? If you chose to leave, you have to have a good answer for it. And we can help you with that. You know, COVID certainly threw a wrench in all that too. Could be why, you know, you were laid off. But you need to address the question. You got to be specific and honest. You can't be negative. You never, ever, I don't care who or how bad they were, ever say anything bad about the company or boss or coworker. It just puts negative light on you. Explain what you learned, what you plan on doing to improve the next. If something didn't fit you and it didn't work out, just be honest and what you did to rectify that. Tell why you feel this job is right and expect to answer questions about gaps. So we all have gaps. And again, I've counseled people numerous times on an answer on this. So if you need any help with that, please let us know. We're happy to help you. Okay. Any questions on this?
I think that never be negative is really important, because I'm kind of the bad example for Job Connection, because I've pretty much done all the stuff we say, don't do this. And one of them was I had an interview, a friend, networking, a friend got me an interview with another telecommunication company, and went up there and talked to them, and they asked me, why are you interested in leaving this? And I talked to them about how they really hadn't understood how intelligent I was, if they weren't following my example and they were doing these things. And later on, my friend told me the reason I didn't get the job was because the VP I was interviewing with said I was just too negative. And I thought, wow, I thought I was telling them about how intelligent I was. But as Bobby says, they have enough negative people. They don't need any more.
They've hired all those already. They're already working there.
Yeah.
So anyway, before we head out, Jeff, Jennifer, Sonia, it's easier to connect here in the room. Do you guys have any questions that have you thought about that you'd like to address at this point about anything we talked about yet?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, you guys feel free to just jump in anytime and we'll cut in and address whatever questions you have.
Yeah, and Greg, do you have any comments? Maybe you want to?
Yeah, if I could just offer a comment on this, the response to this question, why did you leave your last job? I've been in a lot of interviews over the years where I saw an interviewee answer this by saying, I live here in Houston, so a lot of the people have been involved in the oil and gas industry. And so their answer was often a lot like this. With all the ups and downs of the oil and gas industry, I survived the first 3 layoffs that our company went through, but the fourth one, I was laid off, and a lot of other people were laid off too. And when they leave the answer like that, when they leave it on a down note, it takes all the energy out of the room. It takes all the energy out of them. It takes all the energy out of the interviewers, and it's very difficult to come back from that. So what I try to coach people to do is to, create a bridge from whatever your answer to that is, but create a bridge to look to the future and look to a positive future. I was laid off, but now I have the opportunity to take what I've learned and apply it, in a much better situation with a company that that I agree with their values, but turn it around and make it future focused and make it very positive, so that you put the energy back into the room in the interview. So that's just a quick comment there.
That's good.
Great point. Absolutely.
End it with a smile on your face.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And when you're networking, I always say, if people say, well, you're unemployed, well, I'm between opportunities. I like that a lot better than saying, yes, I'm unemployed. So it's a little more positive spin. Thank you, Greg. That's a great point. Okay. Where do you see yourself in 2 years? This is common. They could say 3 years. They could say 5 years. Companies are looking for loyalty. They want to know that the investment in you is going to pay off for them. one of the most expensive things for companies to do is to hire and train. And so in all your answers, you got to make sure that if in your head, let's say you're going to retire in 3 years or 4 years, that is not something, of course, you even want to come close to hinting at. Because they want to invest in you and have it pay off for them where you have longevity. That's what they're looking for. Initiative and integrity and growth, and that you look for to be there as a career, even though you may in the back of your head know, I'm only going to be doing this for 3 or 4 years. Okay, yeah.
Even they can guess about my age, I prefer to say that retirement is not biblical. No one in the Bible time retired. They worked until they fell and died.
That's right.
And what should I do if I retire?
Yeah,
And that's it.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm, absolutely.
yeah, that's changed, yes.
Mhm. So my goal, it says, my goal is to work for a terrific company where I can grow and have a great career. So that's showing that you want to learn, you want to grow, and you want to be there.
I do, in 2 years, try to have your job. No, I don't
No,
think you want to
That
say
doesn't
that,
work.
right?
No.
You know, Greg had a good point a while ago in the last question there. It was about how ending on a sour note can suck all the air out of the room and
Mhm.
turn an interview negative. And so, and Al was really pointing out that, you know, there's enough negatives in the world. We need to avoid negatives in our interview process. And so one of the things that, you know, where do you see yourself in the next 2 years? I think that's a legitimate question. I think one that you need to put a lot of thought into and to address it. But I think I would leave out any of that answer, anything that has anything to do with the loss of a previous job, or how you feel about situations, or even concerns about retirement. Because that's something that's in your mind that you're focusing on. But and you know, they may think about that or wonder about that, but there's no reason to give that legitimacy by addressing it for them. You really want to focus on your accomplishments. You want to focus on the things you've done. You want to keep it on a very positive mode. That's the reason it's simple a question, as simple an answer as this is. It leaves it on a positive note rather than addressing a negative side. So always be aware that, you know, not just saying negative things, but in the way that you come across and the way that you address things could come across more negative than you want it to.
And also, I guess my background in sales and marketing, and it's a note in our notes here. You might also say, I think it's a great company to work for, and you will be very proud that you hired me. That's an assumptive close. People don't ask for jobs anymore.
Mhm.
Most people don't. And you just thrown that out. You know, you're doing a little close there.
Pretty
What are
close.
they gonna say? They can't say yes or no. They're gonna discuss it.
Mhm.
So
One more time. I
If-
like
if-
it. Read
if
it
someone
again.
could, if a company may use age as a eliminator, right? They'll see it on my resume, and they could tell it from the gray in my hair. So should I dye my hair, you think?
That's a good question.
I think you should dye your hair if you really want to, but I don't think you should dye your hair for the interview. I think that they're not hiring your hair,
Yeah.
they're hiring your skills.
If I'm a hair
So
model,
that's
maybe
where
they
you-
are.
That's where you want to focus, continue driving home those skills and the stories that those skills talk about, the skills those stories talk about. I think a lot of times our hangups are just that, our hangups. Not theirs, but ours. And so when we bring these things to the table, when we start addressing those things, that's a problem. You don't have any control over what other people are going to think. You don't have any control over what they're going to do. You only have control over what you think and what you can do. And so what you should always think about is my skills. I can do this. I'm good at this. And then answer the question. So why are you good at this? Why do you think you're good at this? What is it that if you were hiring, what is it you'd be looking in you to present, and then talk about that? And I think anything else having to do with age, when we talk in the resume, I have people ask, well, where should I cut off my resume? You know, 5 years, 8 years, 7 years, 10 years. My answer to them is, I think if the last job that you had, because you had so many, drove you into the second page and it was a minimal job, I'd probably wipe it off there, but you want to embrace your strengths and embrace your history and embrace your successes and embrace the things that you've done. You've learned a lot of things. You've covered a lot of ground. You've organized a lot of things. That's what you want to bring to the table. That's the only thing you want to bring to the table. And anything else is counterproductive to your search.
And you've got the option to dye your hair. I'd have to paint the top of my head. So I don't think you should go consider that.
Now, this is my opinion here on this too, is that, you know, age is definitely a thing they consider. We all know that, right? If you have the opportunity throughout the interview to say something like, you know, I just want you to know that I am really happiest when I'm working. I'm one of these people that love what I do. And I have a lot that I can offer you. But one of the main things is that I don't think I'm ever going to retire. It's not a job to me. It's a passion. So I think sometimes if you have the opportunity to address the monkey that's there, it's only going to benefit you, because so many young people today are leaving a job in a year or two because the grass to them is always greener. And again, that's expensive. And what we have to offer is not only our experience, but we have the dedication and the no interest in just jumping jobs all the time, that you're looking for a career and to bring your value and what you can do for that company to them.
Let me tell you what I think the greatest second half of your answers are always going to be. You're addressing something difficult, or you're addressing something you address what you have to address in a positive way. Maybe like this: my goal is to work in a terrific company where I can grow and have a great career. The second half of that answer is, as a matter of fact, one time before when I was, and then fill in the blank and answer that question. You should always take these things again. I hammer this home because your stories are the crux of everything else we do in interviewing is the hair combing and the teeth brushing. That's all needs to happen. But everything we do in the interview comes back to selling, and selling is through the stories. So so no matter whether you're talking, what you're talking about, or what you're bringing to the table, the second half of that is, as a matter of fact, I know just what you're talking about. One time before, and I tell a story, bridge into a story every time that you can. Don't let a good story lapse.
One other thing I want to add, of course, is we say to smile. I mean, you don't want to be silly about it, but if you think about it, if you always end on a positive note, it's always such a good thing, because your work environment, basically those folks are going to be your second family, right? You're there 8, 10, 12 hours a day, maybe 14 or more. And so they want to hire people that are positive and happy, because that's makes the job more fun, right? So being positive, being smiling, being happy in a sense, but professional through this interview. They want to hire somebody that they're going to have fun working with. Okay, so, all right, let's see. Okay, so of course you're going to get this question. Tell me about your strengths. I always say you at least have to have 3 in your head. Speak of the strengths, of course, that's derived from your accomplishments. What attributes, how they qualify you for the job and set you apart. Again, it's kind of like your marketable definition, in the sense, bringing in strengths, in the sense towards the end of finishing it, how you can benefit the company. Again, given a story, how you were creative, how you were a problem solver, how you supervised, or were you analytical, how you were detail oriented. So, you give those strengths and try to remember what their hot buttons were, and you come back with those strengths to show them how you can solve what problem it is and why they're wanting to hire somebody. Does anybody have any questions on this? Okay,
This question always amazes me because people are afraid to answer this question in an interview because you do have to be a little more specific. But I see it as this is the softball question of the year. This is the easy one. Because what they're asking is, well, so pick your greatest strength and toss it out here. Tell me about your greatest strength. And when you bring that strength in through a story, it's going to carry it. So this is a question that you want. Because you're not trying to figure out what it is they want. They're telling you, well, tell me what you think about what your greatest strengths are. And then so what have we been doing all morning? We've been talking about strengths, right? So what are your greatest strengths? I'm gonna talk about them. I'm a problem solver. I'm a team leader. I'm the direction of the program. I'm a project manager. I can do these things, and those are your strengths. So you get a chance to bring those strengths to the table very specifically and very clearly through the tune of your stories.
How do you find out your strengths?
How do you find out strengths?
Accomplishment-based stories.
Well, that's an idea. We could probably figure out what your strengths are. And they might even be on that page of 25 that people have in front of them.
and if you get that opportunity, please do it in the beginning, where you can ask them, well, tell me more about the position and what it is that's important to you, what you're looking for. Because when they ask that, that's where you bring your strengths and your stories to answer what it is, what they were talking about, what they needed. Okay. Anybody have any other questions or comments?
And during this interview, hopefully I might get real fortunate and know what he's hiring for, something that's not written, something that the company has a problem with. That if you can get that, find out something about that, you can be a problem solver right there in this interview.
Okay. And of course, you're gonna get this one too. What is your most significant weakness? Now, Vicky used to start it out with, which I love, because I always come back to how important humor is. And it settles everybody in an interview, because your interviewer, like I said, could be nervous too. So she would say, actually, chocolate is my weakness. And of course, they would always laugh because it wasn't what they were expecting her to say. So you need to be honest, be realistic view of yourself. And if you say, well, you know, if you give an example, something, well, one of the weaknesses I used to have, listen to me, I said used to have, was that I was weak with the Microsoft Excel program. And let's say you know that that was important to you, that was a part of the job that was expected. And say, but you know what, I realized that, and I went online and took tutorials, and I even furthered that by taking a class at a local community college. And I actually can say now that's a strength for me. Okay, so you start out with a weakness, and then you've told them what you did to rectify that or to overcome that. You know, maybe you say, you know, didn't fit your skills, but you went on to have it become a strong skill.
And on two sides of that, don't reveal anything that can be held against you, you know, in their final determination. And on the other side of it, don't say you're perfect. That can be held against you too.
Right,
So,
right. Unless you can pull it off with humor.
yes.
Unless you can pull it. And if you can interject some humor a little bit to make them laugh and smile, it's all the more better because it's showing how you can fit in and your personality. I actually have also talked with some people that actually said, well, you know, I'm not very good at showing up on time.
Okay.
Yeah, or not dead serious, or I'm not very organized. You know, or yeah, they were honest, all right. Well, that interview was over at that point when they're honest. Like, no, you can't say that. You can't do that. So the whole point here is address it and what you did to overcome it.
I
You
saw
know,
the bluebell chocolate chip ice cream. That
yeah,
was what I
exactly.
was-
So, okay, anybody say anything once that they regret? Anybody want to comment on this or still not sure how to answer this? Okay, all right, thank you. Whoops, wrong one, went too far. What happened? Okay, there we go. Okay. They're gonna ask you, why do you want this job? And everybody shies away from this. I get it, unless you're experienced salespeople, which that comes naturally to them. This is where you really have to sell yourself. You have to, and I always say, you have to brag at some point because nobody else is gonna do it for you. And this is where you try to have to pre-close, in a sense. I believe my experience perfectly aligns with the requirements of this job. When can I start? Or what is the next step? You're assuming you're in that final, what do I want to say? Your final chosen of the candidates. Show excitement. Maybe come back to highlights of your skills again. It fits my long-term goals. Explain why they need you. But again, this is a chance to pre-close, because if they want you to ask for the job, they just won't ever tell you that. Okay, because they want to hire somebody that wants it. They don't want to hire somebody that needs it, which is why you never bring up any financial need for why you're interviewing or why you're looking for a job. Even if you could be in good status, it's a negative thing because they're going to think you're not and you're desperate. Okay, everybody wants to hire somebody that wants the job.
You can also say here, I believe in my experience perfectly aligns with the requirements of this job. I can start next Monday or Friday week. They gotta answer
Yeah.
you instead of saying yes or no.
Yeah, I was just looking, I got a text message the other day from an air conditioning company that said, we've serviced your AC in the past. We don't know now, we have plumbing service and we'll give you a discounted inspection. We have a few openings this week or next. Would you prefer morning or afternoon?
Yeah,
There you go. Gotta make a choice.
I got the same one, Al.
Assuming.
So
Yeah.
kind of like,
Yeah.
what is the next
Mhm.
steps,
Mhm.
That's
Should I prepare?
Yeah, when you say even, I can start next week, I've always had them smile and shake their head.
Yeah.
They knew it was coming.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're experienced interviewers, they know it's coming, or they should expect it.
So it's good or not to say?
It's good.
Just say
Would you
what? Just say
To
what?
say, I can start next week.
Yeah, so let me address that, because I think there's some nuances in there for sure. So many people, most people, when they go out and interview, they interview and they conduct the interview, and at the end of the interview, it's kind of, do you have any questions? The interviewer says, do you have any questions for me? And they say, no, you've answered all the questions, okay? And it kind of dies right there, and what happens next, you pull up the portfolio and you walk out of the room and you leave. And I think that that's a bad way if you were in sales and you were talking to people, just like Al was talking about the text message you got. You want the salesperson to walk out of the room with a presumptive close. He's going to going from asking opening questions where we're learning to asking a closed-ended question like, I'm available. Would you like me to do that? You want to close? And we'll be talking about that a little bit more in detail here in a minute. But the close is something that most people miss, and the close can be very simple. At the end of the interview, it would be something very simple that says, hey, I've really enjoyed talking to you today, and I really enjoyed the meeting and learned a lot about your business, and I really think I'm a great fit. I'm available to start right away. Would that be okay? Take it to that close. Will that be okay? It's a very soft and easy thing to do. If you're having a good connection with people, you can even be a little more aggressive than that, and toss out a humorous thing to say, hey, I'm available to start tomorrow. Would that be all right? So the answer is probably going to be no, because he probably has other people to interview. But you've imparted on them the idea that you want to be there and you're anxious. One of the things they want in a person that starts is someone who wants to be there, has a passion to be there. So explore that passion and do that. So you can ask those questions. I had one sales manager that a sales director that I was coaching several years ago, and he walked in. He said the first thing he saw was a bunch of softball trophies over in the corner, and he played softball, so they had to talk about softball. So they had a connection there. And so at the end of the interview, when it was all over, he said, hey, I think you just described the job for me. I'm ready to go. My my cleats are hanging on the wall in my garage, I'm gonna go home and clean them up because I'm ready to play.
That was great.
And so,
That's great.
so he, he opened the door there. So you can't always be that, it depends on the situation. It's very situational. But never walk out of an interview without a close, to close the interview with something positive and constructive that imparts the fact that you want to be there. Yeah, I'm anxious about this. I want you to be, I want to be there and make sure that they understand it. And practice that close. Make sure you close every interview that you go to.
And my best interviews were number one, where they did all the talking. Number two, I used the word excited numerous times throughout the interview. If they told me about the job description, and it had to be genuine. When they were telling me a little bit, I'd say, well, that's really exciting because, and maybe go into a story because I've done this. I love this because I would actually lean up when I was excited, like I would have said, I'm excited about it. In other words, the job. They say, why do you want? I'm really excited about the opportunity. I believe my experience perfectly aligns with the requirements of the job. And to kind of prove it or whatever, you can even say, which I just thought of, would you agree? Because if they don't, they're going to tell you why they don't think you fit. And then you have the opportunity to do what? Well, you know what? Maybe a different story. A new story of accomplishment that you didn't get to talk about earlier throughout the interview. And some they may not have realized or known, gives you the other opportunity to pull out things that they're thinking, I'm not so sure about this person. I've got other people to interview. You've got a shot at selling yourself and overcoming whatever objective they may have. So that's another way to kind of expand on that. Okay. This is a given. Have questions prepared to ask them. We've talked about this before. Shows you're interested and prepared. Make sure you write them out. And I remember being in an interview where they could see, and I had a little wallet kind of notepad because I didn't want to juggle a bunch of anyway. And I had my questions. I said, well, I got to tell you something. You've answered my question. So my first question was this. You answered that earlier. My second one was this one. I actually read them out because it also gives you time to thinking. If you don't have any of them prepared and you're winging it, which you should never do, it gives you proof that as you read these, that you listened and that they answered those questions. And, if you're at a loss, you can always say, well, how did you start? When did you start with this company? And, what do you like best about it? Again, it's positive. It's questions and let them answer positively. So if you ever, get stuck where they've answered all your questions and you don't have acronyms written down or anything else, you can always ask about that.
You don't want to say, no, you've covered everything.
But I did.
Yeah, that's what he did.
Yeah. I thought that made them. That
You did a good job.
That they had answered all my questions. They hadn't answered, because I didn't ask him. I mean, it was just, yeah.
Well, you're so brilliant. You knew it.
This is one also where we also tell people, even if you realize that, what, this isn't the company for me, you can always ask them something like, hey, who are some of your biggest competitors?
Yeah.
And what does that do? It gives you an opportunity to maybe say, I hadn't thought about going to talk to those people.
Yeah.
And so you can ask them that, but things like, what are your biggest challenges and questions like that? The key is, again, it's being prepared. That's why we come back to those stories. That's why we talk about, having a marketable definition. It's all about being prepared.
And you'll find that when you've written every story that you think you can write, well, you start one, it usually spurs others, accomplishments. You'll find that it gives you a sense of calm because you go into that interview thinking there's nothing they're going to ask me that I'm not ready for. And that's invaluable.
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Let me just talk one more thing, because I just can't refuse this. People don't do this very much. They don't ask when it gets to the point of the question of the point of the interview where it says, do you have any questions for me? They'll probably get there. And they do kind of avoid that because they're not prepared. So being prepared with a list of questions that you might want to ask. So I want you to think about those questions like this. In the course of the interview, what was the purpose of your interview. The purpose of the interview was to figure out what their problems were and tell them a story that addressed that problem about your skills and abilities, about your accomplishment. So now you've reached the point where you've been trying to listen for what they said, so you could inject a question based on what they said. So what happens now is it shifts in your favor. Because now you get to ask them specific questions that will cause them to say something that allow you to bring yet another story to the table. These questions, the interview lasted this long and you address all of their questions, but you have more questions that you can bring because you need to bring more stories to the table. You need to bring several stories to the table during the course of that interview. 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or as many as you can, depending on how long the interview lasts. But by you asking the questions, that really brings life back to the interview again, because it ended when they asked all their questions, they had an agenda. When they got their agenda taken care of, now that comes to you, and you have the opportunity now to throw out questions that's going to cause them to say something more specific to your skills, so you can address those skills. So never miss this opportunity.
Thank you, Bobby. And this is the hardest part, is you gotta listen. We all do it, especially if we're nervous. It's so easy to ask a question and then be sitting there and thinking about how you're gonna respond from what they may have already said. You're already thinking ahead. They probably can tell that by your eyes, and it's subconscious. So if you can practice interviewing, we are happy to help you, mock interviews, or your family or whom you may know. Because the hardest thing to me in an interview for most people is to listen. Salespeople comes naturally because we're looking for the hot bones to make a sale, right? But for everybody else, a lot of people, it's just natural to already start thinking about what you're going to say. Kind of like if you get into disputes with your spouse and they're giving an answer on something and you're already thinking about how you're going to come back with it. You gotta practice the aggressive listening, and so that you may pick up a hot button, and it may seem small, and if you touch on it, you might find that was actually the key. And so that's why listening is so important.
To be able to listen what I do, I learn what they say to be able to say at the end of their talk. So basically what you're saying is ABC. By be ready to say this, I need to listen.
Right.
So without notice, I'm
Right.
listening to just flip it and give it back. So
Yes.
the guy or she knows that I listen to him.
Right, we call it mirroring. I've got customer service training different, and we had to learn how to address people that were upset about something in a healthcare environment. And so you always repeat it. So what I'm hearing you say is, and that's exactly what you're doing. You're complimenting them by the fact that you listened, and you're confirming what it is that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So that's a very good technique and a great what do I want to say? It compliments them quite a bit. So absolutely, I don't think you can go wrong with that.
So if you really stop and think about it, when you go into the interview and it begins and you're trying to figure out what their problems are, but you haven't talked to them yet, then you don't know what their problems are, right? So how can you address their problems if you don't know what they are? Well, you can't. So who's going to tell you what their problems are? They are. So how can you learn what they are when you're talking instead of them? You want them talking. They need to be talking in order for you to learn. They need to be talking in order for you to listen so that you can apply your accomplishments to the right spot. They need to be talking. So it's listening is very important because I call it practice aggressive listening. You have to intentionally listen to what they're saying and pick up on everything so that I can find the right spot. And if I've done a good job of writing my accomplishments and I've reviewed them and I know what they are and I've laid them out there on the table in my mind, then it's going to be a lot easier than to bridge back there when that happens. I want to reach over there. I'm going to say, well, that sounds like story number 6. I'm going to tell a story. And that's what you're talking about one time before. I'm bridging that story. I'm going to do it one more time in the second part. I'm going to listen for opportunities to do that. You can only do it through listening. You can't do it through talking.
Right. Thank you, Bobby. Okay. So asking smart, thought-provoking questions allows you to paint a picture of your experiences. We call all these magic questions. As Bobby was saying, a great response to an employer could be, I know just what you're talking about one time before again, and you're bridging into that accomplishment story. We can't say it enough. And sometimes I know people go, oh, I gotta sit and think about this and write this out. But it's just gonna make all the difference for you in interviews. And you know, it's all about getting the offer, right? You may not even want the job. And then you're real casual, right? You're not nervous because it's great experience. But you might find that through the process, you end up thinking you want the job. So, you know, it's just, you know, it's great to have those accomplishments and to know, because you just never know how an interview can turn. And it can be also possible that you're thinking, I am way overqualified for this. But again, it's practice. And the number two thing that happens a lot is they'll say, you know what, you could do this, but I'm thinking of another position you're probably more qualified for. So they may have openings coming up that's not published. And you could end up, you know, moving into a better job or another job that's a better fit. So you never know. Okay. Okay, number one, describe, which is a great question to them, because again, you're finding out what their hot buttons are and whether how you can come back with this. Describe your ideal candidate. Ask this to get more information, share one of your accomplishment stories. Same thing we keep saying. You're going to find out if there's anything that they mentioned that you may not have, like say a certain computer skill or program skill or whatever it might be. And again, you hadn't had the opportunity throughout the interview, and it gives you the opportunity to say, well, you know what? Back when I worked for such and such a company, I did, and then you can tell them how you can fill any of those ones that you might have not gotten to mention. That's a skill of yours.
There may be something hidden agenda that the interviewer's got in the back of his mind that didn't show up on the HR, you know, fill out this form for help deal. And you may hit upon what the person really is looking for. You know, somebody that's right behind them, just asking the right question can really open up the door for a lot of stuff.
I really like this question because the facts are that what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out what he's looking for, right?
Yeah.
So ask it.
Mm-hmm.
Just ask him, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
What skill? And so when he starts describing his ideal candidate to you, he's gonna lay out what's in his mind, not what's in the job description, not what you think, but what's in his mind, her mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so by knowing that, now I've got something to seize on.
One of my friends had an interview once and job description didn't hardly hint on it. And he went in and found that they really needed somebody that knew this certain program to do the job. It was majority of it. And he had experience with it, but didn't have much chance to didn't know to really bring it up and talk. Well, when he found out then he just went and he ended up getting an offer because it was something that he really had a lot of experience on, but didn't think it was that important to him from what he had assumed from the job description, what they had said. And then when he asked something like this, he says, then he brought up his experience with it in his previous jobs. It made all the difference.
And you know, answering the question, like a story that you had, Roy, to me, you may have answered the question to show him a skill, but your story had other skills that also they would be looking for. I mean, a person can pick out, oh, wow, yeah, he did this too. So there's a lot in your answers when you do a accomplishment story.
And the other thing I want to mention too is when you helped the lady, she picked up on that you were friendly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because otherwise she would have asked you, well, can you help me with this? So you were approachable, you were engaging enough that she's like, hey, do you know anything about this? So she was comfortable with you. So whatever you're doing like that, that's great. I mean, it's building rapport like this, or a sense of positivity and being able to for her to have asked you to help you with that. So not knowing you from Adam.
And these questions also lengthen the interview. The longer the interview, the better shot you have of getting a job.
Right. Okay, magic number 2. What are some of the changes your company has faced in the past couple of years? And you share your stories, what you've experienced something similar. Where did my notes go here? One of my favorites I wrote, where did I have it here? Because of COVID at the time, I wrote, how did your company adapt to COVID and the changes it brought? You could expand on that a little bit.
Sure.
And the reason I like this too, but I like bringing in recent that we've all experienced, recent history, a pandemic that never happens, right? Because you're going to get a real good flavor of how the company, are they adaptable? Are they talking about how they made positive changes? I mean, was it positive in the changes, or is that interviewing kind of disgruntled about it? Because, you know, you want a company that's always wanting to change and grow and go with the times so that you have a career there. So I love this, but I also like bringing in COVID because a lot of companies had to make major changes in how, you know, people were at home and they didn't have that before. And it also lends itself as if they say, well, we had 100% people working from home. Well, how are you now? Did you bring most of them back? And then you get a flavor. Well, if you really want to work remote 2 days a week, you're going to find out, like one of the bank I know, they quit that entirely. And they're losing young people that have certain experience coming out of college. They want entry level. They can't get them because the kids want to work 1 to 2 days from home and they're not budging. And these companies are finding a hard time when they say it's 100% in the office. They don't want to drive. They don't want to have to pay for parking. They don't, you know. So you have to be adaptable. So this is a great question for that, to find out, you know, about the company and were they positive in the changes, or were they grumpy about it? You know, and you can see that in their answer and then watch their face.
The object of this question is to find out about problems, issues, and concerns that they face.
Mhm.
If you can find out about problems, issues, or concerns that they face, now I have something to plug one of my accomplishments into about how I solve a similar type problem. How I run into a similar type situation. So problems, issues, and concerns are the meat of the conversation that you want them to talk about. And then by, you know, talking about what are some of the greatest changes, challenges that you face, what are some things running into you? All you do is ask and tell me, what about some challenge? And so you can then bridge it with one of your stories.
Mhm. So just what Bobby's saying, what has been the greatest challenge a person in this position has faced in the past? So that's a great question too, to find out what they have to say. And again, listen and watch their face. If they answer you and they can't look you in the eye, they're probably not telling you the truth. That's again, a subconscious thing. You got to watch that. And that's why it's important you maintain contact also with them throughout the interview. So think about the strengths and apply it in your answer and bridge into a story. Any questions about these? So I think most people know this, but we have to state it. You got to avoid asking these questions. How many vacation days will I receive? Are the hours flexible? Do I have to work weekends? What's the salary? I never discuss salary until I you know, was made the offer. I mean, that's when you have the opportunity to do that. But you know, things are a little different today too. I mean, I've spoken with a lot of different people where the recruiter's doing the initial contact and they ask one of the first or second questions, what salary are you looking for? And I know it's because they think if they want too much or whatever, that there's no point in going to talk to them. So, you know, I mean, I would always say, well, you know, if you need to have an answer, I need to know what the range is. Because I would always try to avoid a number, always at all costs.
Or that I need to know more about the job before I can give you that.
Right. And like Vicky says, there's a lot of factors that go into the consideration of a position. And so, you know, but I'm going to just give you the forewarning, a lot of recruiters are going to ask. They want to know if you're in the range. So-
But one of the reasons they're asking that question about what salary you will make is not so that they can negotiate your salary. You come up with a number too low, you pin yourself in the corner and you kind of screwed yourself around a little bit. But the reason they're asking that question is that if I'm gonna invest my time and effort to figure out whether you qualify for the job, I want to know whether you're gonna fit the criteria if the job offer were to come. Because if your expectations are far above what my job is, I don't even want to talk to you. That's an eliminator. I'm gonna go somewhere else. That's what it's really a yes or no. Do you fit the criteria so that you'll be there when they answer the question? And Don's right. And one of the things you want to do is avoid answering those questions as much as you can. They're gonna come at you, they're gonna do that because, hey, if they can put a check in that box and find out they've got that information on you and then they're ready to go. So don't do that. I think these questions right here are questions about the job. Questions about the benefits, the salary, the hours of flexibility and all those kind of things. And the answer to those questions are something that you'll find out after you have a job offer. These are not pre-job offer questions, these are post-job offer questions. Because when you've got an offer, you still have opportunity to turn it down anytime you want to. So when I'm addressing these kind of things, they can bring up negativities about you that you don't want them to know. So how quickly will I get promoted? Well, so you're gonna bounce out of here real quick. I don't want to, that bothers me. That's a trouble. So what are the benefits of this job offer? So you're really focused on benefits. I'm trying to get tired of solving this problem, and you're worried about benefits. And so that puts a negative on your side of the equation. So bringing up any of these types of questions are going to be a negative for you. So don't bring them up. Just don't bring them up. If you can address these things toward the end of the process, if there's a job offer, then you can address it then. But until a job offer comes to the table, none of those questions will give you an opportunity to bridge one of your accomplishments.
And that will prevent you from getting a job offer.
Yes, and they usually will answer those questions when they're trying to convince you to take a job.
Yeah.
And I always say, it's a lot about the salary, right? It's about putting food on the table, okay? We all know that we work to have a living, but you want the company to believe that you are there for the opportunity and the opportunity alone. And that's what you want. So any of these questions are going to throw it back to, well, you just care about the position, or, I mean, you just care about, what you're getting paid and how many days off you have. It's just negative.
Well, the interview
So-
says, the interview is all about you bringing value to the organization, not what the organization can give you. And as Bobby said, as it gets later, job offer time, negotiation time, then you can ask these questions, but I would verbalize them differently than just those. They don't look good.
You'll have plenty of time to get that information. Yes, sir.
With the question, how much you think you want the salary to be without being rude? Why won't we go forward and see if the job is something that I can help with? And then we get to the right number.
But
Maybe won't be stand between us when we get to it.
maybe a way to address that might be something like, I'm excited about the position and talk to you, but there's a lot of things that will go into the decision. And more focused on the job. Can you tell me a little bit more about, and then bridge the question back into the job and the skills? So these talk about the skills. Anytime you can bridge them into the accomplishment stories and not the salary stories, that's what you want to try to do, is to move in that direction.
So after each meeting, you might want to sit down and document the interview. Who'd you meet with? How long did it last? Did you ask for the job? What's the next step? Which is also kind of a pre-close, if you can ask that, or should ask that. Send a thank you notes to each person that you met with. And I have to say that you don't write the same thing to every one of them, because they could compare.
Yeah.
You got to find something unique about what they said if you were listening. Were there any questions you still need to correct or explain? And that's another thing too. If they brought up something that you didn't address, forgot to, you can always kind of address that in the thank you note too. I remember you mentioned, and I wanted to let you know that, yes, I have that, whatever it might be, your experience. Set a time to follow up. Any questions or concerns about the job? So, again, in my interviews, I'd always ask, so what is the next step? And I would get to find out, well, we have several candidates. We usually have second interview. It could go to a panel interview. So this is a 3 to 4 or 6 week process. And so you know in your head that if it's something you're really excited about, you're not worried when you don't get an email that week or something, you know? So you can at least find out sometimes their timeline, because some companies take months. It's months for them to make a decision. So, so it's good to kind of document these, because if you start having interviews, you don't want to confuse some of your, you know, your answers on things with different interviews. So it's always good to jot it down maybe once you get home from that interview. Okay. And we've talked about this before, ask for the job. She says here, from what you described, it sounds like I would be a great fit for this position. How soon can I start? Or I can start next Monday or Friday or Monday, or, you know.
If you're successful with the interview, you're gonna get to this point.
Right.
And if you get to this point, then you need to be prepared to address what the answer to that question is for you, what you're comfortable in talking to them about. So be prepared. This is a question that you need to be prepared for.
All right. Salary negotiations. Okay, you need to have an idea of what the market values for your skills and experience are. One of the websites is Glassdoor, which is really known for giving an idea of salary ranges that you can research and know from your skills and experience or job titles. The other one I believe is like salary.com or something. So do your research, know what your bottom line is. You know, they're going to try to get you cheap. Okay, so you need to know your minimum amount that you're going to be willing to take. Because I got to tell you something, if you take something, you know you're not happy with it, chances are you're going to be gone a year. You're going to find something that pays you more. And they don't want that to happen. So only you can decide that. But those websites will help you to keep you to know exactly what's the range is. So you're sure about what you're asking for isn't out of reach. Do not bring up compensation until the offer stage. We talked about that. Resist throwing out the first number, you know, because lots of people do this. And my daughter, who's, you know, 26 and does well interviewing, but she said so many of the friends she's talked with just accepted the first number the company came out with. Just accepted it, didn't even try to negotiate. They left money on the table. So, you know, like I said, you need to try to get as much as you can. It's only because the other thing to that, my banker husband told me, which I never thought about, you try to get the most you can get initially, because with raises only being 3% or less, do you know how many years it would take you to make up for what you were really wanting? It would take years. So because the percent's so small, so if you take something, you know, that you're kind of okay with, you may end up leaving to get that jump, or it's a long time before you get where you really want to be making. So negotiate benefits at the end of the process. So all these factor into this too. And like we said, there's a lot to consider when they say, what do you want? There's your salary. What are the medical? I mean, I've gone to HR and gotten the medical plan, so I have an idea what that cost is. It can be huge for some companies. It can make a difference for you thinking you've got a great job to now it's not as much as I hope, because the medical costs keep going up and it's so expensive. You know, you can also negotiate vacation days. So that's something that doesn't come off basically off their bottom line. So if it's something that, if they say, well, you know, like they told my daughter once, well, we can't pay you this, but you can earn a bonus next year that'll get you to that number. So that's how that recruiter was able to get her. Or, you know, as my husband went on jobs with experience, he said, well, I'm not starting over in 2 weeks. I'm not, okay, what do you want? 4, 5, whatever it was, sure. I mean, usually they're real flexible on that. So again, everybody has our own unique things that you want, but many things are negotiable when it comes to an offer. Okay, salary target, who's asking? Is it the screener? Is it the decision maker? I'm just gonna read, salary is important to me, and there's a lot that goes into my salary consideration, but before we cover that, when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned, and you can bridge into a question or topic that was discussed earlier. Can you tell me a little more about that? So again, if this is too early, this slide gives you an idea how to bridge, like Bobby had mentioned before, into going back about that it's about the career. Okay, any questions on this?
If you're talking to the decision maker, you've got a little more flexibility and your upper end. The screener just going by what the decision makers fit out as parameters.
And one of my friends had an offer and they just kept going back and forth. So it was a recruiter contacting him and them talking, let me go back. And I bet they went back 3 or 4 times to management. So. Okay. So they may ask again, what's that? Are you looking for? Avoid an answer, direct answer. When forced to give a number, provide a range based on your research. Never discuss personal financial needs. And everybody understands that, right? Because do not use the word need. Because it gives I'm telling you, it's like, it gives them the idea that you need it because you're not in good financial position, possibly, or you haven't made good choices. They don't want to hire people that have issues like that. And nowadays they're getting real bold and asking or getting a credit report, which is crazy to me, but you've heard that, Bobby, right? That they're getting credit reports on you. So, and the thing is, it's really to me none of their business, but then you look obstinate, right? If you don't agree to it.
Every job I've had, they pull credit.
Huh?
For every job I've had, they pull credit.
If you're, as a recruiter, if I'm working with somebody that's gonna be in a job that has some financial responsibilities in it, they're gonna pull credit reports on that, and they, at least at some level, just to make sure that they're good managers of money, if nothing else. But yeah, they can do whatever they want to in a lot of different ways, whether it's background or credit or whatever it is. But
This number of the credit score, it doesn't mean anything. I barely make a living. I'm telling you, no, I'm not in an interview, and my credit score is 806. So I don't know why they're asking for this number.
Well, because there's a lot of people that their credit score is not 806, but 608.
A lot of bandits out here.
And so there's a lot of, just being able to demonstrate financial credibility is really all that they're gonna do. That when they see that, they're gonna, that's just a check in the box saying, okay, that's that, and now let's focus on your skills, because they're not hiring your credit line, they're hiring you and your skills is what they're looking for.
But if it would have been a 608.
Well, yeah, if it looked like you were financially irresponsible, because you had some foreclosures and things that, failure to pay and credit, a lot of credit hits on your credit, from financial groups, that could be a negative. It sure could be a negative.
Well, they could say, well, they're good at interviewing because Austin said all the right things, but they need this job instead of wanting it. So that's the other thing they think about. So.
Well, I think if the credit's bad enough, it could retract the job offer.
Yeah.
It could retract the job. I think it's very low and bad.
I've seen job offers that were offered a month ahead of time that were retracted the night before you're supposed to start.
That'd be sad.
Well, it is sad, but they, that's sort of, they've got the strings and they can do what they want.
Yeah.
Now, if they typically do that, they're gonna have a hard time hiring people because not many people want to work for a company like that. That's another.
And I'll never forget a lady friend of mine who was older than me at the time. I was in college and she told me she interviewed for this teaching position. She goes, well, I told him I needed it. I knew right that moment she wasn't going to get it, and she did not get it. And I didn't have the heart to tell her. Thought that's the wrong thing to say. But okay, so you're waking to green lights. I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
I was gonna
Great.
say, one other place that companies are really examining is your social media presence. And they
Yes.
will scour that to look for
Yes.
hot sports opinions you may post or pictures of a party and whatnot. And I know my wife will tell me that that's particularly prevalent when they're bringing college interns in, that they
Yeah.
have software that seeks that stuff out. And if you've got, if old Jeff has a bunch of beer bottles in front of him on his Instagram picture, they may not, they may hold that against you.
Yeah.
So clean up your social media, or just,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
or turn it off.
yeah, or
turn
make it
off
private
for
at least,
you.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, my husband counseled my kids early and said, don't ever post something you're gonna regret, because once it's out there, it's always out there.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I did the same thing, but they didn't listen, so it's.
thank God I guess mine. Okay, so the interview lasts more than 30 minutes. I've had them last an hour. When you were introduced to other people, shown around the office, and especially they say this would be your desk. That's a real, real good green light. Your job, they start saying your job's duties. And when they start to also sell the value of their company to you and the value of working for them. Okay,
That last one, if that happens, you've done your job.
yeah. Absolutely. Okay.
Let me take lead on this one, but go to the next slide.
The next one.
Because this is my favorite thing. This is the area that you worked your tail off studying, preparing, doing your research. You had a great interview, you sold, and they love you, and so now they're gonna walk up and they're gonna say, well, I think we'll hire you, and here's a job. So what do you do? Well, I think the actions you take from that point for the next day or so are going to be critical to money that you're going to make and how you're going to leave an impression with them. So I like to always describe this in terms of a scenario. So we'll lay out the scenario. And the scenario is that I've been successful in the interview process, and they just made me a job offer in the room. There it is. What do I do? The first thing I always tell people is, first thing is, don't accept the job offer immediately. Accept it and say, well, I'm excited about this. That's really great. And this is where you can cheat a little bit and use your spouse or your significant other to say, this is a key position for us and a key decision for us that my wife, my spouse and I made together. And I'd like to share this great news with her and deal. So I'd like to go home and talk with her about this and get some input from her. And I can, but I'm excited about the job, and I'll give you a call in the next 24 to 48 hours. I'll call you at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and give you a final conclusion. I just want to include my spouse in this decision. So why did you do that? Well, you did that because you wanted to get out of the air-filled room. So, and the emotional room, because I'm excited, I'm emotional right now because I just got a job offer, right? So I'm gonna say, yeah, I want to take this thing. I want to take it now. So I want to take it. So you need to get out of there so you can make an analytical decision, because in no time can you make an analytical decision with an emotional surrounding. So get out of the emotion and get in there. So now I've left, I'm walking out of the door with this job offer in my hand. But so at that point, you might turn around and say, I'd like to, I don't understand, I don't know a lot about the benefits. My wife's gonna be very interested in that. Do you have something I could use to explain to her about that? And,
And medical coverage.
could you give me a letter or something with the pay, with salary that we quoted, so that I can show her what this information is? So what do you do then? Well, I go home. I go home with a job offer. Now I can sit at home on my computer and open up a spreadsheet and I can lay out and see analytically what is the job offer, when do their benefits start, how much vacation is there? And you're somewhere along the line, you may come up with something to say, hey, this is a traveling position and a traveling sales position, and we didn't discuss, travel expense.
Reimbursement.
I don't understand, that's a, so I collect that information on you, give me a chance to go back and discuss that with them so we can get that taken care of, because it's something I would have missed in the heat of battle if I'd accepted that interview right away. So I sit there and I take the job offer and look at all of the data, all the details and everything there, and I look at it and I discuss it with my spouse and say, this is what we're doing. And I probably will come up with something that is about the salary. Is the salary okay? Is it good enough? My view on salary is this. A good negotiation happens when both people leave something on the table.
Mhm.
When both
It's a
people leave
win-win.
something on the table. So if I push the salary all the way to the max, then I may not get a much of a jump in the next pay range because I'm already at the upper end of the pay scale of the job. So I want to be in a good position there too, so that I can grow in the future. So there's a lot of things to consider there. So the key thing I want you to get to is blame your spouse and say, I need this information to be able to communicate this to her at home. And they'll get it to you. And what'll happen 9 times out of 10, they'll whip out this letter or they'll send it to you shortly after you leave, willfully, because obviously they already fall in love with you. They want you to come to work. All you're trying to do is not stumble on your way out of the door. So by accepting that, by taking the job offer and taking all the stuff, you got a stack of benefits. They want to hire you, so they want you to understand what the benefits are, and what the vacation policy looks like, and when it would start, and how long you have to wait before insurance counts, and all those kind of things that are key in starting a job. I have them with me so I can go lay them out and look at them in a cool day. And so what do you do then? Well, I decided if the black boxes are few, and I can live with this, and I still like this, I'm gonna call them 3 o'clock and say, hey, it's done. Or if there's a black box over here about travel that I didn't understand and I really needed some better clarification, give me a point to come in and talk to them about that one specific thing in the that's what's called salary negotiation. There's many pieces to salary other than dollar bills. It's all the other benefits and ancillary things that go in there.
And I have to keep coming back to ask for HR.
Sorry to interrupt. I have to leave. There is rockets from Gaza, from Tel Aviv. I have family there. I need to find out.
Are they? Okay.
I'll
Well,
be
thank
there
you for
next week.
coming.
Hey,
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
God bless your family.
Yes. But I still go back to, you really need to ask, even if they're kind of hem-haw or whatever, you need to ask them for HR to send you the medical benefit plans, because that can make a whole big difference in the offer. Because medical plans are so expensive nowadays, and they most of the time will understand that. I found that you're waiting more for that than any other part, the offer, anything is getting HR, somebody sends you that, and they understand it. And you can just say, hey, look, I'm really excited, but I need to have this information to really look at the offer as a whole.
I think that if they've offered you a job, they want you to be there, then they're gonna understand that, and you're probably dealing with a hiring manager, the person with the stick and the pencil to be able to sign off on this.
Mhm.
So he's gonna make sure that you have what you need, because he wants you to be able to explain this well to your spouse. So he's gonna load you up with a cardboard box full of stuff that he wants you to take, because he wants you to do that, because he wants you to accept the job. He's selling the job at this point. So you'll find it's gonna be quite easy to get there.
Mhm.
I was going to say, you could say I would like something in writing or whatever, so that I can review this with my trusted advisors or my inner circle.
Right,
Yeah.
advisor, yeah.
And
real
also,
quick-
it is very important to get it in writing, and once you sign it, keep a signed copy for your records, because
Correct.
I have a nephew who had to go back to his offer letter because there was some conditional future items in that offer letter. And when it came to it, they actually when he started to question, they actually presented him with an edited offer letter that he hadn't signed that didn't match to what he signed.
Oh, my God.
And that was Amazon, by the way.
Oh,
Yep, that happens.
Wow.
Documentation is good. There's a stigma to demanding documentation sometimes, so. Again, I think the process here is
Yeah.
blame it on somebody, but get out of there with it and be sure you got it all.
So maybe I'll
And-
just go ahead.
and yeah, and real quick too, my daughter got the most she got because the recruiter made the mistake of saying that the boss only wanted her. Well, guess what? She had the power for the negotiation. So you have to listen through all that because you can end up having it benefit you when they say too much. Okay, so again, rehearse your accomplishment stories, keep them in file for reference, practice your active listening. We can do mock interviews with you if you need it. You know, the next workshops on behavioral interviews, which I strongly suggest. It's not really something we can answer for you because we all have different backgrounds and experience, but we can certainly help you with you know, getting you prepared for these questions that are not yes or no answer kind of questions, and ones that give you situations that maybe you have never thought about. So, any questions on that?
So hopefully one of the things you learned today is there's a reason for the stories. The reason for the stories is for you to be able to understand who you are and what you bring to the table, and then how to use those stories to communicate what your strengths are. You can say, hey, I'm a great leader. I'm a team builder. I'm a problem solver. But that doesn't mean anything unless you can back it up with an accomplishment story that demonstrates how you are a problem solver or a team leader.
And if you don't get the question opportunity, I always say, make sure that towards the end of the interview, you get the question of are there any other topics you'd like to discuss? And basically what you're still trying to pull out of them, if there's anything you didn't get addressed that they may think you're not qualified for. So you can overcome it with a story. Okay, we're gonna have a closing scripture. 1 Samuel 1:17 through 18. Eli answered, go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. She said, may your servant find favor in your eyes. Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast.
As we go forward in our life in this journey, because finding a job isn't a task that you do, it's a journey that you take. And as you go forward in this, be sure that you bring God with you on that journey, and that he's part of your plan as you move forward.
Okay, Dennis, would you
Sure.
give us a closing prayer?
Let's be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Before I do that, also want to say thank you to Donna and Henry for leading us today through everything. Thank you, Al, for the computer. Thank you for everybody who has joined us today in person or online. We also hope that you'll share this information with others about Job Connection, with your friends, family, and other individuals. And so they can also get that information and help them in their search for their next job. So,
In our prayers, Odin, when you tell me that he's got family in Israel right now, and there's a rocket barrage that's been going on the last couple of days, and he's been having a difficult time finding out if his family is okay, and so I'd like to include him in our prayers.
yeah. So, Lord, thank you for bringing us together today. We know it's your plan. We know we're not here by accident. So we thank you for all of us today that we're able to gather here. Lord, we thank you for providing that hope that we need every day in tough times, and that hope helps us find our purpose in life. We pray, Lord, for Odom and his family. We also, Lord, as we go forward, we pray that you will help everybody in their searches lean into you, Lord, and use you as they go through looking for their next career. Lord, we ask this all in your almighty name. Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bruce. Any last questions? So you can connect with us. Obviously, I mentioned the QR code, and of course, it's lakepointe.thejobconnection.org. You can check us out on Twitter and LinkedIn. And like I said, there is thousands of jobs on our website, both nationally and local. So you can certainly search and look to see if there's anything that might of interest to you. And we are all here to help you. We have email on our website. If any of you have any questions or need to reach out, again, we're happy to help you. And we appreciate you coming today.